good.
Thanks.
That's an awesome responsibility, and I'm sure you will do great on it.
Thank you. I was hoping for a little more time to get adjusted into the world of council, but I guess it's been almost a year, so I guess I'm ready.
There you go.
Well,
So we have 4 women mayors then in the county of Humboldt.
hey, that's
Blue
great.
Lake, Rio Dell, Arcata, and Eureka.
And Fortuna.
5. There you go. I stand corrected. Come on, Trinidad. Get some women over there.
Well, I wonder if Debbie can hear me.
I can hear you, and if you can give me just 1 second to try to get Beth in. For some reason, she wasn't able to connect.
Okay. I just need to get my name changed, and I can't do it.
So Beth is in.
I'm here now. Thank you, Debbie, for sorting that out.
So Mike, let me resend it to you so I don't have any idea why it's coming up as Una.
That's because the one that you sent earlier must have gone into Zoom Netherworld because I couldn't find it.
Okay.
And Una sent me that one.
Okay, so why don't you log out and I'll send you a new invite.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
We should have just made him do Una's staff reports.
No.
While that's happening, can I ask a quick question about process?
Mhm.
How do members of the public participate in this webinar format? I'm just not as familiar with it.
Yeah, it'll be just like it's done. My understanding would be really similar to how the board of supervisors does it. So they will call in. So we won't have them on screen, like we will hear their voices, but we won't see a picture of them. And they won't pop up like they're, kind of on our panel since they're not. So it's just kind of a way to hopefully control a little better who's popping in and out of our meetings.
Okay, and sorry, is the call-in number readily available already?
Yeah, it would be on the agenda.
Okay, I will, I know of some folks who are going to call in, so I'll reach out to them now.
Okay, great.
All right, I am back in my own mind again. And I believe we have a quorum.
Recording in progress.
We do have a quorum.
All right, well, thank you. Sorry for the delay. We will call this meeting of the Humboldt County Association of Governments Board to order pursuant to Executive Order N 2520 and Assembly Bill 361. We are holding this meeting virtually until further notice. We are called to order. Can we get a roll call?
Supervisor Bass. Mayor Jones.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Here.
Council
Here.
Member Burgle.
Here.
Mayor Heinley.
Here.
Mayor Atkins Salazar.
Here.
Council Member Woodall. Council Member West.
Here.
Chair Johnson.
Here.
PAC Member Arroyo.
Here.
PAC Member Allstrand.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our first order of business prior to public participation is a findings of Senate Bill 361 to allow remote meetings for HCOG board and advisory bodies. And I believe Director Burks is handling this one.
Yeah, I'll just give a really brief staff report on this. You may be making similar findings in all of your jurisdictions. So, we had talked last time about the executive order that allowed for remote public meetings. It was due to expire at the end of September. And in place of that now, we have AB 361, but it does require us to, or your board as legislative body, to make specific findings, which are in the resolution that's attached to the staff report. Basically, that we are in a state of emergency and that there are even local recommendations to continue social distancing. So if your board finds that it is unsafe to meet in public and that it would go against local recommendations, then staff recommends that we adopt this resolution. And this does need to be reevaluated every 30 days. So this will be on the agenda every month until it's safe again for us to meet in person. And because we have this resolution, what we'll do is in the future, it will be a consent item. And we can, but for this first one, since we're adopting the resolution, we wanted to talk about it and prepare everyone for what to expect. We can reevaluate it at any time in any meeting when we feel like it's safe to go back into in-person meetings. It does, so basically that's where we're at now, and staff is recommending that we adopt the resolution.
Okay, do we have any questions for our executive director? Or do we have a motion?
I move, Adeline Jones, Blue Lake Mayor, that the HCOG board adopt resolution 21-24, approving required findings to allow virtual meetings to continue.
And Bass will, okay, never mind. I got beat out of the second, I think. I don't know who got it.
You can have it.
Oh, okay, thanks.
We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And thank you. At this time, we'll adjourn as the HCOG board and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee, where at this time, our first item is a presentation from Mr. Pimentel on the Eureka Arcata 101 corridor project. And if he's ready, we're ready.
Good afternoon, evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. It probably won't be too much of a real formal presentation, more than I have just been wanting to be a regular visitor at these meetings, to be keeping you guys up to date on our repackage and re-advertise the Indianola Undercrossing project. So this is more just intended to give you guys an update on where we're at. Not really a whole lot to report. We have continued to work with our consultants at Kleinfelder and the Collins Group, who are our, I guess you call them the Collins Support and Embankment specialists that are helping us out with this construction method of work. And just to recap for anyone who maybe hadn't received previous updates, bids had come in on the project. We determined in the best interest of the state to re-advertise and repackage the project, so we rejected the bids. There was a portion of the work in the project that was more of a design bid element that was not really consistent with our typical design bid build type contract. So we are furnishing a design for that portion of the work, and that's what we're currently working on. I think maybe it's the last time I gave you guys an update. We were about to start our supplementary subsurface investigations and doing more geotechnical drilling out there that we were formally going to require the contractor to do, that we decided to take on and furnish that information to be able to put together the design. So all of that drilling has taken place. So that was amazing. Have a tough time sometimes getting drilling done for quite some time on projects with just the sheer workload that geotechnical consultants and our own staff has. So it's pretty amazing feat to be able to get it done so quickly. But it definitely speaks, I think, to the commitment that Caltrans and the department has to getting this project out to bid again so we can get this very needed and critical project built. So the consultant and our staff are currently working on developing the design for this portion of the work. Our tentative schedule shows right now that we will be complete with the new plan set sometime around February, March timeframe, somewhere in there. So not too far from now. It is likely that we are going to need a time extension for the construction fund allocation. Typically there's a 6-month timeline to award once you've allocated funds for construction. But the CTC had granted an exception for certain projects that fell within a certain window, I think mainly related to the pandemic and some of the delays and challenges there. So this project fell within the ability to have 12 months to award, and that date is up on May 12th of 2022. But by the time that we get through advertisement and award, it's going to be really close to that. Right now, our current schedule shows we'd actually be about a month after that in June. So it's likely we're going to need a short extension. I've been in communication with our headquarters staff on that. So we're going to be monitoring that. We're obviously pushing the team to see if we can expedite as much as possible. But there's only so much we can do, but we're monitoring the schedule week by week, meeting weekly with the team. Beth has been a part of those meetings based on her availability, so I'm keeping her in the loop on all of that. But yeah, everything's going as planned right now. So we're excited to be able to get this hopefully repackaged and out to advertise again in the early spring of next year. Any questions on that?
Mayor Jones.
Hi, thank you, Jeff, for giving us that update. I always appreciate those. When you repackage, will the cost of the project necessarily go up?
That's undetermined. I mean, there really is no change in the work. The scope is not changing. So the only really thing changing is that the contractors were going to be required to furnish their own design for this portion of work, which is going to have to go through an approval process with Caltrans. They're also going to have to do their own drilling. We're doing all of that. So you could make the assumption that, well, if the contractor's not drilling and they're not performing that design, there's definitely a cost there that now the project is taking on with some remaining design budget that the project had. So, you could kind of assume that you wouldn't have that expense. Those expenses are pretty minor compared to the overall, project cost. But I think you could also potentially make an assumption that the design that we'll be furnishing will eliminate some uncertainty in the contract, because the contractors formerly were kind of having to bid on a project without having really a complete picture of what the geotechnical kind of makeup was of the soils and to really base their design on. So whether there was some inflation of bids there due to that uncertainty, I don't know, but there will be more certainty in this. So there is some thought that potentially we could see better bids, but that'll really come down to when we put it back out there and see what the bids are. And also with respect to kind of the fiscal climate of the construction industry and whatnot at that time, which is really not that far from now. But so the scope of the work is not changing. So on that premise, we're not expecting, like we've added work or we've changed really the makeup of how this is going to be constructed. It's simply, we were asking the contractor to design this because this type of work is traditionally done that way across the nation. But with California contracting law, it's extremely difficult, we found, to be able to move forward in that type of contracting method where we put it on the contractor to furnish the design. So that's what we're doing. So same work, we're just doing the design now, and all the contractors will be essentially bidding on the same thing as opposed to having to furnish their own designs. So we'll see, but I think there's some merit to the point you make there, that we could see some better bids potentially.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Pimentel?
Yes. Do you have a sense of the anticipated completion date with the timeline extension? What would we be looking at for kind of buttoning up the project?
Yeah, so the project is estimated to take approximately 3 years to construct, 3 seasons. Our former schedule had us with an approved contract date, meaning we'd have a contractor on board, I think it was September 1st. So we're about a month and a half into that timeline right now. We typically always have a delayed start with our projects. So the contractor likely wouldn't be working right now anyway. Typically it's a 55-day delay start. The other thing to factor in is the contractor was going to have to go out and do all the drilling, which we've been doing all this time. They're going to have to go furnish their own design. They were going to have to submit that design for approval, all before they would really be able to work. And then also kind of couple that with a contractor getting the job right about right now and starting to furnish those things, not still being able to work, but going right into the winter season, just by how the project ended up in terms of its schedule. They'd be going into a winter season and probably really not doing anything until, the weather, until we stop getting, probably rain, because they're working out mostly in that median to start with, very wet, very difficult and challenging to work in the winter. So I think really, even though if you look at calendar days of when they will actually start, which is still kind of to be determined, but we have a good idea based on what our schedule looks like to re-advertise this, I don't know that we're really going to see anywhere near the actual kind of perceived delay in time on the calendar, just because of we took a lot of work in the front end on our own that we're doing now. So we're really not losing time on the drilling and the design because we're doing it. And then also that they were going to be going into the winter and really not being able to do much at all. So that's what I'm really pushing with the team, is to get this out into the 2022 construction season, which is when the bulk of the work was really going to start anyway. So I'm hoping that by late summer, early fall, things are really cranking out there and we see some activity. So there'll no doubt be a little bit of a delay, but I think it's not as much as it's maybe perceived to look like.
So maybe a better way of asking my question would have been, because I'm hearing maybe 2025 end of the year, but perhaps more expedited, but maybe just as a roadway user, like when can people expect there to be a functional underpass or undercrossing? What do we call it? Undercrossing?
You call it undercrossing, and the
Okay.
basis for that is it's always named based on what the local road does, either over or under the state highway. So being that Indianola goes under, it's called an undercrossing. And I learned that not that long ago. So
Okay.
I feel proud when I get to teach someone about it. Anyway, so 3 seasons starting in 2022. We'd go 23, 20. 25 is likely when it would be complete, and it could carry out into 2026. And that final season of construction and the final stage, and I don't have the construction schedule in front of me, but when we enter that final stage of construction, I believe there's 4 stages. That's the stage when we close the median crossings and we start having, start getting some function of the undercrossing. But that'll be, a transition obviously during that last stage. But I wouldn't expect it sooner than 2025 to be complete. It could go into 2026.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the only other thing I wanted to mention here, I'm going to a Manila Community Service District Board meeting after this. So I'm going to be hitting a record for number of board meetings in a day. But there's been some concern, not related to this project, but it thought it was. So since we kind of have a public forum here, I thought it'd be a good opportunity, if you guys don't mind, to give this update. If you've traveled southbound on 101 recently, you've noticed we have a detour at the Jacoby Creek Bridge location where we're in process of replacing that. And there's a detour that goes into the median. That bridge that you drive on today in the detour location is actually the final bridge that we'll be using on the alignment that you previously were driving on, just, tangent and going straight on 101. But in order to do that, we have to move that structure into place, which is going to require 2 full closures of 101 in that southbound direction. We recently put out some detour signs out on 255, and there have been some Manila residents that were concerned that those signs were related to a detour for Indianola, which is not the case. And so I'm going to that board meeting, and we've done a social media update recently on that. But in case any of you hear about that or have concerned people, that's what's going on. So there'll be 2 nighttime closures, one approximately 5 hours to test they can move the structure, and then about a week later, a 10-hour nighttime closure to move it into its final location. That will not be occurring, though, until about the beginning of July of next year. We were formerly planning to do it in October this month, but due to the forecasted weather, and also we have a pretty hard, not pretty hard, just a strict work window with our environmental permits that cut off our work window. So we had to push that work until next construction season. So that'll happen in July. And then on that note, we are not planning any full closures of 101 with Indianola. We will have some single lane closures, but not a complete closure of 101. So we're planning to maintain at least 1 lane in both directions at all times. Just wanted to put that out there. There's been a lot of questions we've been getting, and I think might be good for you guys to all know that.
Okay, thank you very much thank you for that particular update. And I'm sure it's lots of fun having 2 high visibility projects on 101 going at the same time. So, or 3, depending on how you look at it, with Last Chance, the Indianola, the Jacoby Creek Bridge, and all. So thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, our next item is public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have anybody online for that?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move into approval of the meeting record. Did everyone get a chance to look at that? And if no comment, we'll take a motion.
I move we approve the meeting record of September 16th, 2021.
For a second.
Have a meeting and a second.
Motion.
I mean, a motion and a second, meeting and a second motion.
On the meeting.
Can we get a vote on this?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
PAC Member Arroyo,
Yes.
PAC Member Allstrand.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And thank you. We move to the consent calendar with 2 items: approval of the 2021-22 overall work program and budget amendment, and a support letter for the City of Eureka Bike Plan Sustainable Communities Planning Grant. Would anybody like to pull anything? Seeing none. Can we get would anyone like to make a motion for
I'll
approval?
move to approve the consent calendar.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second. And can we get a roll call for this?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
PAC member Arroyo,
Yes.
PAC member Allstrand,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And thank you. And we come to our first action item, the revised SS Social Service Transportation Advisory Council bylaws and membership code of conduct. And do we have a staff report for this?
Yes, thank you, Chair Johnson. I'll be giving the staff report. So a little background on this item. In 2020, two of HCOG's committees merged. The Service Coordination Committee, which was comprised of transit operators, became part of the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, or the SSTAC, which includes public representatives. And staff wanted to review the bylaws for the SSTAC and add a code of conduct so that there is a shared standard of behavior for all members on that committee. This item was brought to the SSTAC for review and is recommended for approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just have to ask, when I was reading it, have you had some really unruly members in the past? I'm just curious if there were some that kind of spurred, I mean, it's good to have a code of conduct because we've got one, but I was just surprised. I was just wondering if you ever have any members that have kind of gone and not done what would be, maybe had not such good behavior.
Yeah,
I don't know how
Stevie.
to ask that question.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that, Stevie, actually. Yeah, recently we did have a situation with some fairly unprofessional behavior. So we had to address that. And we had a member who was asked to resign, which is really unusual. And I think from my perspective, it would have been really nice to have these policies in place ahead of time so that we know we're following a procedure that's applicable to everyone. I want to make sure everyone feels treated fairly and that, we all know ahead of time what's expected of us. So that was
No, I think it's great. I just was surprised that somebody got, kind of out of hand. It's like, had to be bad. So no, I think it's good to put this in.
Do we have any other questions or comments for this? And do we have any public comment online?
I have not received any public comment.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from board and PAC? Do we have a motion?
I'll move that the PAC recommend the HCOG board consider approving revisions to the SSTAC bylaws, including attachment A, SSTAC membership code of conduct agreement.
I'll second. You can have it done.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
PAC member Arroyo,
Yes.
PAC member Allstrand,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is the Humboldt County Online Bicycle and Trails Map application. And I believe Stevie has this one too.
Yes, thank you. So today I'm really excited to present the official Humboldt County online bike and trail map. So I'm just gonna share my screen so I can pull that up and show you. So this is a website application that is mobile phone friendly, and it shows all the bicycle infrastructure in the county. And we engaged with bike and trail advocates to verify the conditions on the ground. And we also included community recommended connector routes for various skill levels. So we'll just zoom into Arcata here, and you can see you can toggle on and off the bike lanes in blue, the multi-use paved class 1 trails in green, and the class 3 shared roads. We have little descriptors here, and you can also see the bike shops where you can go get your bike tuned up, as well as the bike rental stations. And then we also have the non-paved trails shown. And these connector routes are not official bike infrastructure, but it's streets that are commonly used to bike down. And so they're kind of divided by traffic speed and comfort level, with the green being the easiest, the blue intermediate, and the red going up Fickle Hill Road a little more difficult. We also have the Pacific Coast bike route shown for visitors traveling through. And then another neat feature is you can geolocate yourself and it'll zoom you to your current location. So the next step here is we're going to be promoting this application through flyers and business cards shared at local businesses. And we hope to get a lot of folks using this to plan their trips. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and also just want to thank Redwood Community Action Agency for their help in developing this, and Plan West Partners for developing the website.
Well, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments for Mayor Jones? Got there first, unfortunately.
That works.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that report. We have something here in Blue Lake. I call it a tire inflation station. It's a little machine that is for putting air in your tires. It's right in our downtown Blue Lake area. And it's a great convenience. I had to use it the other day to get me through a bike ride. I'm wondering if you have anything similar in the county, and if you do, if those could be highlighted as well on your map.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mayor Jones. I neglected to mention we do have tool stations as well along the trails. Although I note that we don't have that bike pump in Blue Lake, but it is a very easy application to update and add information to. So we'll make sure that we get that location added in Blue Lake.
Okay, I think it's on the corner of H and Railroad, but you better double check about that. I think that's the location. Across from the Lager Bar, everybody knows that, but that might not be appropriate. Okay, thank you.
And Supervisor Bass.
Thank you. And you may have mentioned this and I just didn't hear it. And I'm sorry I sound this way. If you think I sound bad, Steve is really sick. So my alternate's sicker than I am. So I apologize. You have to listen to this. But does it count things like construction? Did you say that, I mean, is there a way to adapt it so that can be taken into account? And you might have said that and I just may have missed it.
It isn't, like a real time type of application like that. So if a street were closed for temporary construction, that probably would not update. If it were longer term, we could certainly flag an alert on there so people would know.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious.
Thank you.
I've got.
Councilmember West.
I just wonder if you have will part of the app actually allow you to look at some of the trails or tell more information about trails, like that some of them have stop signs or they're slower, or there's start and finish areas that they could read about. has more information?
So that's a great question. Right now, you can click on the trail segments, and it will give a little bit of information. For instance, like an Arcata Marsh Trail or the Humboldt Bay Trail. As far as like distances, it doesn't have that functionality. On the technical back end, it's all in GIS, and layers like that could definitely be added if that's the desire of the board in the future.
And I would ask about maybe locations where they can park a car and be able to jump on a bike, and parking lots, and what kinds of start and finishes there might be.
I'm sure that's something that could be figured out in the end. Any other questions or comments? I will say that I went to the online map and checked it out, and it's amazing how you can get a bird's eye view and everything looks like little dots, and as you zoom in they become city limits and then roads and trails and identifying characteristics with the bike shops and the rental places. And maybe you'll have to notate the Lager Bar in Blue Lake as the location of the inflation station.
Chair Johnson, I believe PAC member Arroyo has a comment.
I couldn't
Thank
see
you. I
her.
must not be like on your screen because I've been like doing some,
I'm sorry.
some stuff. No, all good. Stevie, as you know, this one's near and dear to my heart. I helped over a couple of years advocate for this. And I did not work on the project after that whatsoever, but I was really excited about this coming forward. So I'm so thrilled. But I was wondering if there's given that it's all like GIS layers and data that could be shared, is there the opportunity to, and this is like totally outside of my wheelhouse, but is there the opportunity to integrate this routing information with like Google Maps? Or, I mean, part of why this came about was because like Google Maps does some very illogical routing throughout Humboldt County if you're on a bike. And so that's part of why like my coworkers and I were pushing for this so much years ago. So it'll route you, like if you're trying to go from point A to point B, it'll take you way off into like a logging road into the forest and back around, like really nonsensical routing. So I'm wondering if there's a way to integrate this into those online mapping applications that people use the most frequently.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And that did come up in the technical advisory committee as well. And there isn't that functionality with Google Maps. So it's not really designed to function as a route finding application at this time. You really just have to kind of open it up and kind of plan your route visually and see where you can go. That would be a logical next step for a future project.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions as I scan so I don't miss anybody? And seeing none, do we have a motion? Actually, we should receive public comment first. I apologize. Did anybody come in?
No, I have not received any public comment.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that the PAC recommend that the HCOG board consider adopting the Humboldt County online bicycle and trails map and app.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
PAC member Arroyo,
Yes.
PAC member Allstrand,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion passes.
and thank you. Next item is the Service Authority for Freeway Emergency Draft Strategic Plan. And I believe Director Burks has this staff report.
We're gonna let Stevie do this one too. I'll
Okay.
take the next one.
Yeah, I'm all warmed up. So HCOG is a designated service authority for freeway emergencies and administers the highway callbox program in partnership with Caltrans and the CHP. The SAFE program is funded by a $1 registration fee collected by the DMV. This SAFE strategic plan was developed to guide the financial and operational management of maintaining this system. It addresses upgrades to meet ADA standards and to modernize the cellular network. The plan also looked at call data from the last 6.5 years, and it identified 7 call boxes that are severely underutilized. So we are proposing to relocate these to new locations on Highway 36 and Highway 96, and we'll be coordinating with community groups and Caltrans, as well as a contract engineer on the final locations. We also plan to introduce satellite technology. Although it's more expensive to operate, the satellite phones are necessary in remote locations with no cell service. We conducted a financial analysis of the income and costs of the program as proposed, and found that the SAFE program would be solvent for the next 20 years. These costs also include funding supplemental highway patrols through the CHP. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And thank you. And do we have any questions for Stevie on this item?
I'll ask, I got one. I just want to ask about, how you notice that you said there were, I think, 7 that were being pulled, and they said because they had no calls at all. Is that what you look for? Is it all the way down to 0 calls? Or do you consider, what is considered the really low to take one away and move it somewhere else?
Yeah, thank you. So that was one of the primary issues of the plan, was kind of identifying that threshold. And having looked at all the data, call boxes that are used even once or twice in a year are still providing a vital aid to motorists, because whoever's making that call is in need of aid. And so I wanted to look for the very lowest utilized call boxes, and found that there were these few that had 0 calls in at least 4 of the last 6 years. And a maximum of maybe 4 calls total over those 6.5 years. So these were the lowest utilized call boxes in the system and made the most sense for removal.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, that question brought up one for me. I hadn't, for some reason, thought about this, but in looking at the locations of the call boxes slated for removal, it does seem that, at least based on my cell phone experience in Humboldt, some of them are within areas that I think do have some cell phone coverage, and then some may not be. Was that a factor in your analysis?
Yeah, that was partially. We looked within the more urbanized areas, so certainly they're the 2 that are right outside of Garberville, so they're closer to services, as well as the 2 in Rio Del would definitely have cell service, so they're likely to have less need of making using a call box on the side of the highway. Some of the others, as you pointed out, might not have in areas with good cell reception, but they still, for whatever reason, were very underutilized. Some of them, like the one outside of the Red Crest exit, is just kind of located around a turn and not in great locations for people to pull over. And so, yeah, we are proposing that these be not removed from the system entirely, but removed from those locations and the materials repurposed and relocated to these areas with higher need.
Any other comments, or also do we have any public comment online?
I have not received any public comment.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, do we have a motion?
I'll make motion for staff recommendation. And if you want, I can go through the entire thing, but
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Mayor Bass,
yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes,
Pack Member Arroyo,
Yes.
Pack Member Allstrand,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion passes.
and thank you. And now we come to the item authorization to execute a standard agreement between Humboldt County Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies and the California Highway Patrol for supplemental patrols. Can we get the staff report?
Yeah, thank you. I will be giving the staff report on this item. So this is really a follow-up to the strategic plan, and we wanted to make sure that the board was in agreement with the strategic plan before we presented this item. So consistent with the strategic plan, this would be an annual contract with CHP not to exceed $100,000 to do supplemental patrols on routes 36, 96, and 169. And we have taken this to the TAC and also discussed it with the North Coast Tribal Transportation Commission because we are looking at expanding the call box program on these routes as well. But because they're so remote, I think the agreement was that there's still value to having the supplemental patrols because even once the call boxes are installed, having supplemental patrols out there will mean a reduced or could mean a reduced response time. And also, we won't be able to put a call box, everywhere. So it's still helpful. And that was, sort of the unanimous recommendation is that they wanted to see the supplemental patrols continue. And I think one thing that was really nice that we get from the CHP and that was in the strategic plan is we also get reports, not just on the citations they issue, but on the motorist aid that they deliver. And you'll see that they're actually responding to more aid calls than giving citations, which I think is really important given the source of funding as the SAFE. So yeah, I just wanted to run through that. I think normally this would be a consent item, but given we had just adopted or looking at adopting the strategic plan, I wanted to have that discussion and get a separate vote on this. Happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Director Burks? Well, I know that I looked at Highway 169 on the map, and that is a pretty remote location. I mean, you have to go through almost to the end of 96. Well, after you cross that bridge anyways, and then it goes another few miles out there by itself. So I'm sure that the supplemental patrols would be appreciated as well as a call box when available. Is there any public comment on this item?
I have not received any public comments.
Well, can we get a motion for this?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
PAC Member Arroyo,
Yes.
PAC Member Allstrand,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion passes.
and thank you. And now we come to the item of the Regional Transportation Plan update, the public draft for formal 30-day public review and comment. And it's a large item and it's important, and I got to work on it a little bit, and it's a lot of reading. But thank you. We have Una to help us get through it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yes, it is big, and especially those of you who got it in all its weight in paper form saw that half of it, at least, is our public participation program in the appendix. So we're really happy that we were able to really, thanks to a grant, really spice it up and get in many places around the county. So we got a lot of public feedback, and staff here are really confident that the new emphases that we are saying more explicitly in the RTP, this update, are really aligned with what we've been hearing from the public. So we're also happy that we didn't spring this all 400 pages on you at once. As you all will recall, all but 2 of the chapters have already been through the board and have even benefited from first looks from the public. And today, what the 2 chapters that you are seeing for the first time are updates from the 2017. And those 2 would be the global climate crisis element and also the financial element. So the things that were updated in there, sadly, no big changes in global climate change, except that things are getting hotter. And there was another assessment done statewide. So that's mostly the update in that element. And then, of course, the financial is just updating from more recent projections, what we think might be coming in. It's pretty hard to be super confident that we know what will come in the next 20 years, either from needs or revenues, but we have that at your review. And then also we were able to finish 6 more of our maps, and then also I summarized what we have learned from our community output. Pardon me, and that part is now in our chapter 2, which is called Renewing Our Communities. You also might have noticed that in the public participation program, we have results from the survey. And the survey is still open. It will be open until October 31st. So that part will be updated. We'll be adding comments, but we have pages of really, really interesting comments. People seem to take time and be very thoughtful. So that really helped us also in updating our policies. We've had over 300 people so far take that survey. The other comments that we have gotten were from at least 9 locations of pop-ups that we did throughout the county. We also attended some organizations' meetings and heard from people from there. We were on the KMUD radio in a call-in and heard some comments there. And Beth had what we were for shorthand calling a roadshow presentation to let people understand also what is HCOG and what do we do for the region. And she got some comments in those presentations. So I have summarized for you in the staff report the changes from the chapters you've already seen, and none of it was substantial. It was all really just cleaning up and streamlining and responding to some feedback that we got from written comments. And in my staff report, I mentioned that we got 3 written comments about how we use a process to get projects into the RTP. And I just wanted to clarify that we have gotten comments from hundreds of people, but we've actually only gotten comments from 4 people who were actually telling us, hey, I read the draft and this is what I think should be done. All the other comments were like, what are your goals, objectives for the transportation system? What is working for you and what is not? So those ones were driving the policy, whereas 3 out of the 3 that I talked about in my staff report are asking us to be more methodical in what projects get listed in the RTP. And as I wrote up in the staff report, we did not apply any criteria to any of the agencies who do give us project lists, but staff has been thinking for some time about how do we have a better process for making sure that the projects align with our long-range goals. It becomes pretty complex to do that through the RTP. It's not impossible. We certainly can do it. But because the RTP covers so many modes, some of which HCOG actually doesn't receive any money for ever, for example, the aviation and the harbor stuff, we have tried to strategize, not to use one watered down thing that would apply to every chapter consistently, but try to be more meaningful about when do these projects have to align with funding. And the biggest answer for that is the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, the RTIP, which becomes part of the with the inter-regional one that Caltrans does, becomes the STIP. So that was the criteria that we would first do a robust evaluation thing through a full committee process, public process, and board process. So that is what staff is recommending right now in a way to respond to those particular comments from the community. And with that, I will conclude and happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Una regarding this update? Supervisor Bass.
Actually, I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank Una for all of her efforts in doing this. So, because it was a lot to pull together.
Thanks.
Mayor Jones.
Yes, I enjoyed it. I didn't read the whole thing, I admit. I looked at a lot of the pictures and I love maps. So I looked at the maps in the back and I found those to be especially interesting. Concerning the pictures, I do wish you had said that Annie and Mary Days is in Blue Lake. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh, okay.
Just saying Annie and Mary Days, whereas I think you need to indicate Blue Lakes, Annie and Mary Days or something like that. So you had 5 really nice pictures of our festival, and your presentations were great that day. And other than that, and I love the acronym.
Thank you.
Mr. Councilmember West.
Thank you. I agree that this is really amazing, and I'm really I tried to read everything I could, but wow, that's a lot. But it's pretty well done. I think I mentioned this before. I'm going to say one thing that I'm concerned about that doesn't seem to be anywhere, and that is the problems I've had with trying to do activities on some of the trails because of homelessness and the homeless that are living along the trails. And I know that doesn't fit so well, but just does seem like it's something that concerns me, because we've had to change our way of using trails and be more careful about them, because we've had adults that have said the trails are not worth using because of the homeless who are sleeping in the bushes and are alongside. So I just wish there was some way to have this, consider at least things that we could do to make the trails free of homeless, or at least fewer homeless, so people aren't concerned or scared to use the trails. The 2 that I've had the most trouble with was the Hickshari Trail, where I put on a youth run and half the people wouldn't even come because they were so concerned. And also part of the Hammond Trail near Hiller Park, just north of Hiller Park, where I put things out and had people tear them down, and they just say they can't stop the homeless from coming in and out and destroying things. So I don't know if that's something that can be important, but it seems like that'd be a nice addition to try to look at least.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilmember West. I also have on record, and I remember, and we'll be putting something in there about your previous comment about the shoulders, riding in the shoulders, county and state facilities for bicycle riding. But to your point today, yeah, that is something that I think would fit well in the commuter trails part of our safety policies, health and safety. And we can even think about being more explicit that we can partner with existing organizations who are already in the education and outreach field for that, such as Humboldt Trails Council and such. But I think there's a place for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions regarding this update? Mayor Salazar.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a question in the Complete Streets chapter. There's a really great chart in there with all the proposed projects. And I noticed that only a couple of the jurisdictions have filled in the chart, and there's a lot of blank spaces in there. So I was just wondering if that was going to be filled in before this is made public. And then also just that in the description, it talks about the projects that will meet the most objectives are the top priorities. And so I'm just wondering, is that left up to the jurisdictions to decide on, or does that go through HCOG?
For the second question, the way we did it before, when we had different rankings before, but I believe there were 5. And if any of the projects that held 3 of the 5 objectives, then that automatically made it a priority. As far as ranking, that is a self-ranking that each jurisdiction does of their own projects. So that is done through the TAC member representative. And for filling that out, it has been filled out from all the entities as much as I've been able to get from them. So I acknowledge that the hard part is understanding, did they fill it out and they didn't think any applied, or did they just not fill it out for these particular projects? And I think it's both. But to this point, I have opted not to take on the task of doing it for the jurisdictions. So they still have 1 more month if they're going to come, but they've really probably had 6 months to do it.
Yeah, and I would not expect you to add more to your workload because of other people not doing those. I guess just because I'm new to all this, it's my first time going through it. I was just wondering, how people see the priorities, the general public, if they're really looking through this without it being filled out. So that was just why I was asking.
Yeah, and we have gotten written comments on that from CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. And that was one thing that they actually requested that be filled out more, and that staff actually do it. So that was one entity or person that gave us that feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last, Councilmember Arroyo.
Thank you. And I see that Councilmember Burgell has her hand up too, but it may have been camouflaged against that art. It's hard to see. Yeah, I was just hearing what you were saying, Una, about the safety, about a section related to safety, and that houseless folks and their impacts on the trail might fit there. But now I'm not, is that a different plan? I'm not seeing where you're talking about.
So in the commuter trails, which is not a required element, so it's not as flushed out as the required ones, but we would have the policy table, and safety and health is one of the main objectives that the RTP has throughout. So we would, in the table, under the health and safety objective, we could put a more explicit policy. But I'm thinking more that in the narrative, we could discuss it and then maybe have a HCOG level, staff level project that was basically coordinating with other organizations. So just talking about how to keep it safer on the trails in what I'm thinking right now is like about keeping the trails unobstructed, lighting and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. This is what I'm doing my master's on is trail safety.
Nice.
And yeah, I will be calling some of you, but anyway, it is certainly something I think about a lot when we think about trail planning in this region. And it comes up a lot. And I know in all the hats that I wear, it comes up all the time. So it's definitely a theme that I think should be called out more specifically. So I concur with Councilmember West on just wanting to see it be identified as a concern, even if we don't have specific approaches yet to address all of the needs.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Concerns and best practices.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And Councilmember Burgell.
Thank you. I just had a couple of things to report from our mayor. First, she would like to see the projects tied to some kind of RTP outcomes. Has that been discussed? Yes.
We have the safe and sustainable transportation targets, which used to be called the greenhouse gas ones. So right now, as far as monitoring, it's a kind of overall scope. As far as individual projects, we don't have anything like that on the project by project basis, not at this time.
And it seems that that was brought forward by Colin Fisk from the I can never get the acronym, it's so long.
Yeah, CRTP.
Yes.
The comments I got from him also were about how to get a project even in. So that would be, I guess, the anticipated outcomes.
Okay, and then she was also wanting to bring up the idea of not excluding projects, but how can we rank them perhaps? And if they have a link, require them to add some component that aligns to the RTP.
Yeah. Yes, great.
Thank you.
We are working on that.
Thanks.
Okay. Make another round quickly. Any other comments, questions? And make sure I don't skip anyone. Don't see any. All right. Do we have any public comment?
We do have public comment.
Okay.
The phone number with the last 4 digits, 5603, you can talk.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Colin Fisk with CRTP, that unfortunate long acronym. So I wanted to start by reiterating my thanks to staff and the board for including that new focus on equity as well as the strong, safe, and sustainable transportation targets in the draft plan. I think these targets and the policies that support them lay out pretty clearly what we need to do to address both the climate crisis as well as the traffic safety crisis through investments in the transportation system. But as has been discussed already a little bit, the place where the draft plan sort of falls apart a little bit for me is when it comes to the implementation, in other words, the projects. So I want to be clear, first of all, that there are a lot of good projects that the various jurisdictions submitted for inclusion, but it's not at all clear from reviewing the project lists how they are collectively going to get us to those targets. And in fact, I think some of them either won't help and a few might even be counterproductive. By that, I mean primarily projects that will increase the vehicular capacity of roadways or the speeds that cars and trucks can drive, which causes increased driving, increased emissions, and less safe conditions. Thankfully, I would say we're mostly past the point of pursuing projects in this region that explicitly add more lane miles. But there are still plenty of projects which increase capacity, often in the form of various kinds of intersection improvements. Now, a lot of those projects are packaged with bike and or pedestrian improvements as well, and those are sorely needed. But I think combining increased vehicular capacity with those kinds of improvements is kind of taking one step forward and two steps back in terms of meeting those targets. So as has been discussed, I am one of those folks who has been asking HCOG staff to, systematically review the projects proposed for inclusion in the RTP for their alignment with the safe and sustainable transportation targets so that they can be prioritized, exclude any that are counterproductive, and help the jurisdictions also identify new projects that will be needed to meet the targets. I very much appreciate staff's suggestion that they develop evaluation criteria of this kind to be applied to projects when HCOG has discretionary funding to allocate. But I think that including a project in the RTP implies that it is in line with the region's priorities, and it really bolsters its chances of receiving funding from a variety of sources over which HCOG doesn't necessarily exercise discretion. So while I don't want to put any more work onto staff who have done such a great job so far, I do think that it's imperative that HCOG evaluate the projects now prior to the final adoption of the RTP. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have another speaker.
Okay.
The last four digits, 5039.
Hi, my name is Pat Carr, and appreciate the opportunity to speak on this agenda item and for the good work that you folks have done toward working on making streets safer and reducing greenhouse gas emissions that are going to be emitted by transportation. I'm probably pretty much echoing the words that Colin Fisk said, except I don't think I can say them with anywhere near the technical knowledge and articulateness that he has. Basically, I'm thinking in terms of board and staff roles, and I would ask for the board to have HCOG staff test projects that are submitted for inclusion into the RTP for how well they actually align with climate and safety targets. And, thinking that we really need to emphasize safety on our roads as well as reducing vehicle miles traveled, and generally be looking at streets and roads in terms of how suitable they are for active transportation, walking and bike riding, and their suitability for transit. And looking at this as an area where the snowball sort of begins rolling down the hill at a point before the project may be approved as a part of the RTP. And that rolling, of course, has an effect of its own in a project getting funded for completion, regardless of what merits it may have and the impacts that it would have on VMT and safety. And those things impact that snowball effect kind of has its effect in trending toward its ultimate approval. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes public comments.
Okay. And concluding the public comment and staff, do we have a motion?
I move that the PAC recommend that the HCOG board approve the full public draft of the RTP update vroom 2022 to 2042 for the formal final 30-day public review and comment period.
I'll second, but I do have an additional comment.
Okay.
Is that okay? Well, I'm curious, based on the public comment, whether staff has any ideas about how to, ensure that there's that relationship between projects that move forward and those goals. If you could, it sounded like there were some nuances brought up in the comment to me, and so I was wondering if we could hear what the plan is for addressing them.
So if the motion passes the way it's worded in the staff report, then I would not feel like I could make any changes. But if the board agreed to the direction of me going through and to the best of staff's ability with the project descriptions we were given, we could do it. We could also do it strike out, but take out the projects that that do seem to not get us towards our goals in the short term for sure, or maybe in the long term. But if the board wanted to direct me to make that change for the public draft, I could do that. Otherwise, you could direct me to do that for the final draft, which would be coming back in December, or you could not direct me to do that and we would keep it as the draft you see today.
If we're going to make a change to what's here, we would need to know what's changing. You follow me? We can't change this document and pass it without knowing what's in it and where it's going. So, I mean, we can table it and bring it back at the next meeting or whatever, but that would not be, we can't change this without knowing what's in it. That's where I'm going. If we're going to change, re-rank things or remove elements or programs or projects, I don't think that's going to work.
So if I may, Chair Johnson, I think, one of the things Una spoke to in her first presentation was kind of us, we could have something in the RTP that really directs staff to develop this tool so that when we have, especially when we have our discretionary funding sources coming forward, we know what to do about that, and we know what we're testing those projects against. Right now, for example, when we, and we're doing it right now, we're going through the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. We're working with the TAC to do that. And I think we're doing it similarly to we've done, from what I understand, in years past, which is really relying on all of our TAC members to know their communities the best and put forward the projects that are most important. And sometimes, I think almost always they've had some element, certainly safety improvement, often bike and ped improvements. But, if we were to really prioritize them against all of the safety and sustainability targets, we haven't looked at it that way to say, which of these get us to, the most. And we had to cut projects, right? So we did a call for projects. We got way more requests than we could accommodate. And so a tool like that could be really helpful in saying which ones move forward, which ones don't. That's not historically how that process has been done. But I think it would be useful to develop that, prior to future discretionary funding cycles, where really we're in the driver's seat here at HCOG to look at, well, what's getting funded. So that is something that we could look at as staff and bring back. Wouldn't necessarily hold up the RTP process, but would help us have better guidance as we move forward with future discretionary funds. What it doesn't get to is Colin's point of, but if it's in here, it's eligible for other funding sources. So HCOG, really has a very small percentage of the overall overall transportation funding. And on one hand, I wouldn't want necessarily to limit jurisdictions because they do know their communities best. And we want, often whatever funding source they're going after, the first question is it in your RTP? So, one solution we talked about at the staff level was, kind of having two project lists, a list that's eligible for HCOG discretionary funding and a list that is been, dictated by the jurisdictions and are important projects for those jurisdictions. And they could still say they're in the RTP, but we wouldn't necessarily consider them for HCOG discretionary funding purposes. So there's a lot of different ways we can flesh this out. And I do see Colin's point with that scenario I just mentioned is, well, do we want them in here at all if they're not really getting us to our goal? So I think there is a big discussion. I think it's worth having. And we want, please, let us know what specific questions you have to make sure that you feel good about giving us guidance on what to do next.
Okay, it just sounded like we were going to vote to release this for public comment with the knowledge that what's being released, we know that it's a draft, but with the knowledge that things were going to be materially changed, and in some cases substantially changed, project lists and programs, and that's where I had some trepidation. That's all I was getting at. So are we looking to change that before it goes to public review, or is it going to be released as a public draft and after it's gone through the draft public comment brought back, and that's when it will be finalized? That's where I'm looking at. It sounded like it was going to get changed today or start changing and then be released to the public with some changes from what we saw today and then come back after comments again. That's all I'm wondering is where it's going.
Yeah, and we have all those options available, and I think we've got, really until our December meeting, that really is when we should have something adopted. So we built in a little extra time, so just for this purpose, to make sure that once we saw the whole project here collective together, that, we can kind of think through any remaining issues. And so we do have a little wiggle room in the release schedule. If that's something we want to, direct staff to go make changes, bring it back, we could technically accommodate that and still keep that December schedule on track. It gets tighter and a little less comfortable, but it certainly can be done. And again, we have such a variety of options here. One could be, just include a policy that directs staff to go and develop this tool to evaluate projects. And as Una was saying, then that gives us the time to take it through committee and, really come back with something far more thought out than we can maybe do in a short period of time, especially given, kind of the cycle of when we have our TAC meetings and when we could get it to the board. So that is something that I think makes sense to me at this stage, is really directing us to go and put a policy in this RTP saying, yes, it's important. And I guess the take home message from that option would be that it really would be, kind of limited to what we spend our HCOG discretionary funding on, because at that point the project list would appear in the RTP and in their full glory as they are now, and then we would be following this direction to develop this tool, and we look at having a few months to do that before we have more projects that we would be looking at. The RTIP comes through, once every 2 years. We look at that. We do have bike and ped funding that we can distribute annually, and that is also considered discretionary. But again, it's already limited to bike and ped projects, so I would hope those are meeting our targets. So, but yeah, that would be a way to keep it moving and make sure we don't lose sight of this task to really tie in our funding to these safety and sustainability targets.
All right, I see that. Okay. Any other? How does the motion as it was made, does that stand still? Motion and second?
I was going to comment on my second. I like the idea of staff actually going through and looking at the projects that don't fit with those goals and bringing back another draft. So potentially deferring it to our next meeting. I know I seconded the motion, so this is awkward, but I also am, you know, like I hear that. I understand the process of how these projects come forward. So all those jurisdictions have like brought what they think are their priorities to the table. And so it's kind of an interesting strong arm to say like, well, actually, no, now that you went through that whole process, you know, we'd like you to backpedal on some of these projects that you've determined to be a priority. And I don't know, you know, because my role here is as HTA, I don't think that it makes sense for me to advocate for a total reframing of the process. But I like this idea that at least in the future, that would be used to decide what projects can even be supported by HCOG in the future, like identification of projects for funding. So I would say my second still stands, but it's an important question for all of you who are representing your cities. Like, do you want projects to go forward that don't meet these goals? Like that's a big question. It just doesn't feel like my role on this particular board.
And whether a project meets the goals and how it gets there is each agency's situation is different in what the projects are. So we, you know, any comments from the board?
I'm just having a hard time understanding us pushing forward projects that don't meet goals. So that sounds off, but I do like the idea that Beth is mentioning that we can state that we would like to see some kind of tool put together. And that would be, well, I guess if we were to say, we were to vote for this and state we would like that to take place, that's something you would continue to work on. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Supervisor Bass.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, you know, when we talk about the different jurisdictions, because I think Natalie brought up a good point. Perhaps this is a conversation that can be had with the city managers group that also includes the county. So I don't know. Am I frozen? Can you hear me? Here. Okay, can you hear me if you can't see me?
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know. Did you hear any of that? I can't tell.
Yep, we heard it.
Okay, good. Because when Mike said something, I wasn't sure. Anyway, it just seems like get their input so that and buy-in. So my internet has been freezing up, so I thought it might help.
Mayor Heinley, did you have a comment or question?
I thought the purpose of putting it out for public comment was to hear anything that they might want to add or get changed. And then you can make that change when you go to the final. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, that is part of it. I think because we've brought it piece by piece, it's sort of, we've done this soft release, you know, and we wanted to make sure that what goes out to the public has had, you know, represents the direction that the board has given us. And I think that's kind of the crossroads we're at right now is, you know, is it really representative of that, or is there a different direction we want to go? But it is, you know, not set in stone until we adopt the final version. So yes, it is expected that, you know, we would be still taking public comment and reacting to that comment.
Yeah. Well, then I don't see what we're actually going back and forth on this. If we can make the changes that the public wants or that we want before we get to the final draft.
Mm-hmm. Well, I heard that we were going to change this document that we're voting on today. We were going to change it here and release it with some changes, but without knowing what the changes were yet. That's what I had heard.
Yeah, well,
and I know it's going to go out for public comment, and then it will be substantially possibly changed. But we will see that.
Yeah, I can't see making a change now and not knowing what the change is. I would say, put this out and let the public comments or our comments come and make any of the changes before the final.
Yeah. With the knowledge that there will be for lack of a better word, a tool built to evaluate projects. Correct?
Correct.
Yes, Mayor Jones.
I just wanted to say that if my motion needs to be amended, I don't know if it's that the HCOG staff needs more time. Maybe the 30 days is not enough time to receive comments. If there's going to be something added, I would be happy to amend my motion to make it a longer amount of time, say 60 days or something like that. If that's the direction that we need to go in.
Councilmember Burgell.
Thank you. I know I don't sit on this committee often. I'm just filling in, but I just had a question about releasing a document with information that really has no relevance. If these projects that need to be removed don't tie into the goals or vision of the group, it makes sense that we wouldn't want the public to actually, why would we give the public more to comment on if they're not even something that's going to be valid or considered? So I'm just curious if I was hearing correctly, that's what I was hearing. And I was curious, what kind of staff time does something like that take to just go through that list and to look at which projects do align with our goals and which projects do not? Is that something that takes a great amount of time, a lot of staff time, or is that something that can be done relatively quickly and brought back?
The issue would be we can do it, but some of the projects, when the technical advisory committee then reviewed it, they might then say, well, you didn't really understand what the project was. And the issue is to get, it's just mostly the timing of the meetings, that making sure like the TAC sees which of, for example, their complete streets projects might get struck from the table. I only have a few weeks to do that because of the way just the meetings go. But if there were an agreed upon definition or criteria that was easy to apply, then that would be very easy for staff to do.
So currently you don't have that, is what you're saying?
It would be all interpreted from our safe and sustainable targets. And so for one example was, there are a lot of projects in there that are drainage improvements. And so we could take out all the drainage improvements. I even brought this up when Beth and I were trying to figure out the best approach. And I was like, well, without drainage, what does happen to your complete street? It fails. So, you know, what's our tack there? So on the one hand, it'd be pretty simple to say, but that's not for our aspirational goals. So it doesn't need to be in the RTP to get your drainage maintained. And that sounds like it could be pretty rational and valid in that circumstance. So we would take it out. But then it would help us then when the TAC looked at that to say, okay, well, I will represent it better because that was part of a bigger thing. And so that iterative thing would make it, would give me confidence in the projects. We would just have to find time to do that.
So perhaps then now is not the time to do this, but certainly we'd want to consider some kind of criteria and something, you know, some kind of policy in place for next time we go through this process so that we don't go through this kind of struggle that we're going through in the moment.
Yes, and the board can amend the RTP.
Okay. Could that be added to the motion? Could the second or the first make a friendly amendment to include adding, you know, criteria and policy coming forward, or would that be something separate? In it for the future, not for this particular. So accepting as is, but adding that we will be looking at policy and criteria going forward.
If Mayor Jones is willing to make that amendment, I am certainly willing.
Yes, I'm willing to include adding criteria or policy going forward in my original motion.
Thank you.
Okay. Looks like Director Burke.
Just to make an offer that we could, we have a TAC meeting at the beginning of November. So we could put this on the TAC meeting agenda, have a discussion, kind of take the temperature, see how, kind of get their comments, and at least make a report out in November, so that you kind of know, where the TAC is landing on this. And then, kind of keep the RTP process moving as the motion's been amended, but at least give you an update in November.
That's a good comment. Good idea.
Yes, we can do that. My staff report is due Monday, but I'd be happy to take a swing at it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes, with the amendment.
Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
PAC member Arroyo,
Yes.
PAC member Allstrand,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay. At this time, we, by motion, will reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations. So do we have a motion?
I'll move. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations. Can we get a roll call again?
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Councilmember Burgell,
Yes, and I do need to leave at 5:45. I let Debbie know that.
thank you. Mayor Heinley,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay. We move now to the PAC and staff member reports with HCOG Executive Director's report.
Thank you. I have just a few items to update everyone on. The OMIT transit needs process and hearings are happening. So some of you may have already had those hearings at your jurisdictions. If not, they are coming soon. Stevie is coordinating that. So if you have any questions, please reach out to him. He is got all the timing. I wanted to just keep top of mind the Clean California grant that's coming up. I keep talking to anybody I can about these. Again, these are programs, a grant-funded program to look at essentially litter abatement, public art, anything to beautify public space, and also educational components of that. Cities and HCOG and the county would all be eligible applicants for that, but it seems to fit in really well with a lot of efforts, and we're just willing to help with some of the grant writing here at HCOG. It looks like that effort would happen in December. That's when we expect the call for projects. So just keep that in mind. I mentioned it at the TAC as well. If there are, beautification projects, litter abatement projects that, you hear about, just please let us know. We're still trying to figure out if it makes more sense to kind of consolidate into one bigger application to really show an impact, or if it's more strategic to put in a couple different applications, but knowing, what people are thinking about would help us a lot as we evaluate kind of the best way to proceed. And that program is through Caltrans, so we'll be working closely with them on that. And then the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, we are going through that process with the TAC. At the last meeting, we worked to we had a call for projects, and we worked to narrow down the projects. The TAC has made a recommendation. So just very quickly, the projects, several jurisdictions are recommended for project support. And there in the city of Fortuna, there's a 12th Street project at the US 101 interchange. City of Trinidad's looking at road rehabilitation for Main Street. Rio Dell has a neighborhood connectivity improvement project, and the county is looking at rehabilitation and bicycle facility improvements to Myrtle Avenue. City of Arcata is looking at improvements to Sunset LK Wood intersection, and the city of Blue Lake was recommended for funding for the truck route, and this is Greenwood Avenue Complete Streets project. So I really got to commend the TAC. They really had a lot of projects, and they were very collaborative on figuring out which ones fit in with the funding. You may remember we have STIP funding, and we also have that Coronavirus Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act funding, and they worked really well to figure all that out. So what will happen next at next month's TAC meeting, they will review the full narrative of the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and then the whole package will come to your board with the TAC's recommendation for review and approval. So we're looking forward to that, and there's a lot of work to get done before then. And then I will give the stats we received from the Eureka Arcata Corridor project. Top speeds, I know everyone's always interested in this, 80 miles per hour from a 19-year-old male in Eureka, 77 miles per hour from a 39-year-old male from McKinleyville, and 70 miles per hour from an 18-year-old male from Blue Lake. So these are all locals going this fast, yeah. So normally we usually have at least one out of towner on the list, but this time it was all locals speeding through the corridor. So we will continue to get those reports and have those patrols until the construction starts, at which time the construction project for the Indianola undercrossing will have their own extra enforcement related to that construction project. And then finally, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to HCOG staff. As you saw when you got your packets, they were huge this week for this meeting. And really, we're down a staff member here. We're minus an executive assistant, and everyone just pulled together beautifully. I can't thank staff enough. We actually got this mailing out a day ahead of time, and that is really for all of their efforts. So I'm just really thankful to how well everyone worked together, and grateful we could get all these materials out to you. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, and thank you, staff, for your hard work on that. Next, we have the Caltrans reports.
Hi, yeah, just really quickly, adding on to Beth's discussion about Clean California, separate than the local grant program, Caltrans got some funding for infrastructure enhancement projects, and also some additional funding for litter removal and things like that. So we've been working through some of the local plans to come up with projects, and ultimately have come up with 12 projects throughout District 1, and 7 of those projects are in Humboldt County. So right now those projects are with the headquarters Clean California program, and so pretty soon we're hoping to share those projects with you, but we're pretty excited about that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of things happening. Next would be PAC member reports, but I believe that Council Member Arroyo had to leave for an emergency. So that would appear to be the end of our agenda for the day.
Chair Johnson, it looks like Mayor Jones has her hand up.
Ah, okay. Mayor Jones.
As long as Tatiana is here, I have a question about the 101-299 interchange. Some citizens in my town are wondering what the timeline is on that. It's really exciting to see that. That look like it's going to be a lot safer, but do you have any idea of when that's going to be opening?
I don't, and I should have anticipated this question today and reached out to Pal, and I did not. So I'll follow up with you if that's all right.
Okay. You could email me.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tatiana while she's here? And seeing none. Well, thank you all for your participation in this meeting, and we will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. This has been a great meeting, and I really appreciate all the staff work. It's been really interesting listening to you all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Happy weekend.
Yes.
Take
Thank you.
care, everybody. Be well. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye, Jack.
Hi, good seeing you. By the way, Adeline, just so you know, we lost the city councilman, so we have fourth city council. We need a woman on it. If you got anybody you know in Trinidad, let her know.
I know. I want there to be a woman on the Trinidad City Council. I really do.
Well,
Your wife would be great.
Yeah, President School,
Yeah.
don't even say that. She's busy enough. All right, thanks. I just tried to
Okay.
leave that with you. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you at the next race, maybe.
I hope so, yes. I will be there.
Yeah.